One of the biggest issues in cybersecurity is the topic of cost, trust, responsibility, and transparency of data. As a cybersecurity consultant at PwC, I'm going to talk to you about a solution that every organization implements, but either don't really understand what is going on or just don't really get the foundations. Now in this video, I'm going to talk about the idea of shared responsibility, where I'll be diving into infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, and on-prem. I'm going to talk to you guys about the fundamental difference of each four and walk you through on why organizations would either choose any of these and why that even matters as a cybersecurity consultant to begin with. Now, the idea of shared responsibility came to my knowledge when I've been going through the SC900, right? And so the SC900 is basically a Microsoft certification focusing specifically on identity access as well as governance, focusing on GRC principles as well as compliance principles. Now, I want you to understand that in today's world, whenever you access any type of resource that's either on the internet, on a device, or any type of infrastructure in your organization, it will for sure go through either of these type of setups, right? Infrastructure as a service. I want you to understand that infrastructure as a service is basically a systematic setup where the entire infrastructure is provided, and including the computer storage, and the only thing that you are responsible, or the only thing that you can do as a user, is actually use it, right? So meaning you use infrastructure as a service that includes computer storage, includes the software, includes the virtual machine, includes the entire thing. Now I can give you a specific example. If you have ever used Droplet or DigitalOcean, you can literally go on their website right now and literally rent out a server where they will charge you per hour. Quite cheap, I think. It's around maybe like a few cents per hour. And then you can literally use a brand new computer and a brand new operating system according to literally what you want to do. That's literally infrastructure as a service. Platform as a service. Now the second one is perhaps more common, especially for startups who want to launch their websites, or if you want to launch your own software. Platform of service is very, very common. Now an example I use is Versal. Now I've used Versal to deploy a software that I've tried building up a few months prior, and Versal basically helped me with the entire deployment. And the only thing I was as an end user, supposed to do was literally just provide the code, provide the programming, and the provider, so-called the platform as a service, offered the operation system, it offered the runtime, and even patching for any issues that came with the platform itself. The third one is software as a service. Now, software as a service is perhaps the most easiest and common way for any user to access any type of application or software. And now a very classical example is Microsoft 365. That includes Microsoft Excel, PowerPoint, Word, as well as other stuff with 365, or other apps such as Canva, Zoom, CapCut, and literally the majority of applications that exist nowadays literally use software as a service. Now, what is a software as a service? It's basically you as the end user, you essentially use the software, and the provider basically manages everything else, right? So that's basically the idea here. And so based on those three and what I described to you, the biggest question here, and hence why it's called shared responsibility, is you're trying to figure out who is responsible for specific actions. Responsibility. Apologize about that, guys. So the biggest question is it user? So is it you, or is it the provider, right? Or the provider? That is always the biggest question, because if you as a user would like more control, right, or maximum control, then you're looking at an infrastructure as a service where you have everything from operation systems to runtime to patching, all the way to literally a computer storage. Like not even joking, right? Now, on top of that, for complete maximum storage, and that literally includes like, like owning your own active domain server, or in other words, your own data center and building, then you would talk about on-prem. Now, specifically, that's not very like, it's not really talked about because literally all these big companies, Google, Amazon, AWS, usually they are on-prem, right? But let's just focus on us. Like we would typically just look at those three. But on-prem, if you are an organization that has an on-prem service or infrastructure, then they literally have their own domain controllers, which has their own file servers. They have their own server room, and you as the organization literally own everything. Now I've seen that in my university play out. In my university, they literally had their own domain controllers, but it's mainly because I came from a technical university, so they just wanted to like, how do I call it, like have more autonomy over the infrastructure so that the students like myself can basically do a lot of activities within the environments of the university. But anyways, that's a different story. Now, moving on. So, why is this important, right? Why is shared responsibility such, a big question mark? And why do people, organizations, you yourself need to opt for either one? Okay? And so, the reason is because there are a few items, big items, that we will go through one by one, where, guys, just wait for a second, where there are a lot of big items one by one, where you either as a user don't really want to manage it, or because it's costly or too much time consuming, or for whatever reason, convenience, right? So what are some of the items, and why or how are they delegated? Okay, so the first item we have on our list is information and data, right? Let me just call it data. Data is always, no matter if it's, let me just write it here, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, and on-prem. I'll just write these four down for you. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, the first item is data. Okay? Information and data, that includes whatever type of information you have, whether it's about the customer, the client, yourself, your organization, the user, etc., etc. Data is always controlled by you. Always. It's always a responsibility of you. I'm just going to put you, right? Data is always you. That means whatever, whether it's an infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, or on-prem, it doesn't matter. The data is always belonging to you, to the end user. Okay? The second one is the device. Alright? Let's put it devices. Now devices could be mobiles, your PCs, it could be specific hardwares, it can be, I don't know, a printer. Devices is always you as well. It's always you. Sorry guys. Sorry for biting into this. It's always you as well. Okay? So it doesn't matter if your infrastructure, platform, even software as a service, the device is always your responsibility, and something that never changes. And if you're interested to like why that's the case, there's a lot of like frameworks. I'm not sure if you can see like PCI, sorry, not PCI, like COBIT, as well as what's the big one? GDPR. So there's like specific like frameworks around there. I'm sure if you can see that. That makes it like explicitly clear that these stuff belong to you, no matter like what type of providing infrastructure that you use. But anyways, let's go back. Now, accounts and identities. Accounts or identities. Now, It does not matter whether you are creating an account on Canva, whether you are creating an account on Entridi, whether you are creating an account on AWS or iCloud or wherever not, even though you create these so-called identities and accounts on those platforms, the responsibility of those accounts at the end of the day is always you as well. It doesn't matter, again, whatever application, software, or service provider you use, account and identities is always you. And now, before you guys are confused, because I'm going through every items and you guys probably might not understand. In the beginning, I also didn't really understand it, but throughout, in a short while, you slowly understand of what I'm trying to say here. So just bear with me for now. Always you. Now, identity and directory. And directory. And directory. Identity and directory is basically the idea of who owns like the file storage. At its root, at its directory, who is there to be responsible for that type of data. Now that's a little bit different to, for example, having an account on, let's say, I don't know, Google, as opposed to actually having directory accounts with elevated privileges that very often exist in active domains or active directories. Now those vary. They vary according to infrastructure, platform as a service, software as a service, or on-prem. Now I can say for one thing, identity and directory, if you have an on-prem, right, which is the fourth one, you have control over your identity and directory. If you have infrastructure as a service, you have control to some extent of the identity and directory. If you have a platform as a service, you have close to none. And if you have a software as a service, you basically have no or very, very limited control of identity, specifically in the directories. Okay? The fifth one is applications. Now, applications, if you are especially developing one, deploying one, or even implementing one, this one varies as well, right? Because if you are an on-prem, then obviously you have the autonomy of the entire infrastructure. So you essentially own the application and you control the deployment, you can configure it, you can patch it, you can, I don't know, you can adjust it, you can do all sorts of stuff, especially if you're an on-prem. Now, if infrastructure as a service is quite similar, because as an infrastructure, not only do you take control of users, right, and let's say directories, but you can literally deploy multiple applications. And it goes the same for on-prem, but on-prem I would say you have more control, especially since you can, control the computer resource power, which is a whole different thing. But for now, just understand infrastructure as a service and on-prem has control over applications. Platform as a service. Now, I would say platform as a service has some control of applications, especially let's say you're using 365 or AWS, then obviously there are a few applications that you have some, I would say, elevated rights or admin rights to. But as a software as a service, I would say you are confined through the features of the application, right? Because let's say you're using CapCut or Canva, you can only use the features that exist and that are provided by the website, the software provider, right? That's number 5. Number 6, network controls. Network controls varies as well, right? And now specifically, network controls is varies. Now, network controls is specifically talking about public profile, let's say public profile, forwarding profile. So basically understanding what type of access does my network have resources to. Or in simpler words, I'm using an application. What type of access does that application have specifically to the network? And now for on-prem and infrastructure as a service, you definitely have, let's say, responsibility, meaning you definitely do have access, and you can control resource that is obtained from the network, especially in the network. But platform as a service as well as software as a service is really limited, and you can't really capture specific let's say resources on the network, and it's basically confined from the platform as well as the software as a service. Now the operating system is number 7. The operating system, if you are running on-prem, then you have control. If you're running infrastructure as a service, you also have control. But if you're running software as a service as well as platform as a service, you have close to no control over the operating system, because you're obviously, if you're platform as a service, you are like using like the specific resources. You could configure, let's say, computing power, or how much resource allocated, or how much network latency you would like to use, or storage, etc., etc. But you don't have, let's say, total control of the operating system, right? Now, I'm just gonna bracket these 4 under varies. Always varies, or let's just say depends. And now 8, 9, and 10, I'll just write them very quickly, is hosts, network, provider, and data center provider. Now, host, network provider, data center provider is always the responsibility of the provider. Always. Always, always, always. Now, the only exception is perhaps on-prem, because like if you think about a data center, if you run your own data storage, right? If you have your own, let's say, facility for like, these awesome cool data centers and data storage, then maybe you have some autonomy. But very often this is always the responsibility of the provider. So the user, and this one depends. So the only variable factors, as we can see, the things that never change, is data, devices, accounts, and identities, as well as data, devices, as well as account identities, is always the responsibility of you. And whatever type of structure you're opting for, it's always the responsibility of the user. If you have identity and directory, applications, network controls, as well as operating system, that depends on which one you choose for. And if you have physical network providers, as well as data centers, then that was always the responsibility of the provider. Now, you guys might be asking, after the entire time of talking about this, why on earth does this matter? Now, for one, is because there are certain frameworks, such as COBIT, such as GDPR, such as ISO 27001, such as NIST, CSR, is it? NIST, CSR, and other frameworks out there that make it absolutely clear where the responsibility goes when it comes to those specific items. And now the reason is because when compliance and audits come by, they need to somewhat receive the reporting, the data and insights of these specific items, right? And if it's, for example, the data, devices, accounts is specifically your responsibility, then according to obviously these policies, it is mandatory for you as an end user provide these specific information, these specific insights. Now, another reason why organizations perhaps decide or think about using either one of those is cost, right? Because the cheapest one out of these four is literally software as a service. It costs, let's talk about, I don't know, CapCut or Canva. It costs about $20 a month to use them, right? But let's say you want to use an infrastructure as a service that, I don't know, supplies, the entire infrastructure with, let's say, like 5 cents per hour. Even though it is priced at that much, if you use it more often and if you have higher computing power or high computing requirements, then the prices literally go up, right? It literally goes up. Same applies for on-prem, of course, or as well as platform as a service. If you have an operating system that's just eating up all your resources, then the prices would go up. Now, costs is one, frameworks is one, right? Governance, and the third one is convenience, right? Convenience, or let's just call it control. Now, a lot of organizations, like I mentioned earlier, like my university, they have more like an on-prem infrastructure as a service-ish. Now, I'm saying ish because they do have the data center. However, most of the other areas, let's say such as the network controls, that is actually outsourced to a service provider, as well as the identity directory. They use, I believe it's Entra ID, which is also a service provider. So it's kind of an infrastructure as a service, on-prem-ish. But the reason why they want the organization, to have more control is the reason why they are opting for infrastructure as a service as well as on-prem, right? Another one is convenience. A lot of organizations don't want the hassle to actually manually configure network controls or having to hire admins just to, like make sure that the right identity access managements go through. They don't want to, have to go through different provisioning cycles just to make sure that the servers are running. So in that way, organizations that are lazy just opt for, software as a service or platform as a service that basically does most of the traditional or legacy things that, would usually take a lot of time, especially if you're hiring admins and other people to basically, make sure those aspects are smooth. And so I know it's been a bit in depth, guys, but I hope that you guys understood this video. This is a high level, complex breakdown of the idea of shared responsibility. I try to do it as simple as possible without going too technical so that you guys understand. But if you're interested into going into cybersecurity consulting, especially in the ideas of identity access management as well as architecture, then this is a fundamental foundational principle for you guys to understand. If you did enjoy this video, do like and subscribe. It means everything to me. If you have any questions, do leave in the comments. Otherwise, I'll see you guys just in the next video.